You're not broken. There is a reason your mind keeps returning to silence, why you push through when others would stop, why you can't stand half-truths and yet forgive too easily. There are 7 unexpected addictions that show up after a spiritual awakening, not pathologies to shame you, but patterns that the soul borrows as scaffolding while it navigates a huge inner shift. Name them now with me. 1. Addiction to isolation and silence. 2. Addiction to truth and intolerance for superficiality. 3. Addiction to persistence, the refusal to quit. 4. Compulsive compassion, helping without asking for return. 5. Revisiting the past for energetic recalibration. 6. Addiction to meaning, constant analysis and scanning. 7. Self-pressure driven by soul memory. Each one carries a surprising purpose. Each one also carries a shadow edge. If this resonates, subscribe. We dive into this kind of inner work every week. Listen closely. These are not moral failings. They are survival strategies the soul borrows like a warm coat in a storm, then forgets it's still wearing it once the weather changes. I want to show you how each behavior functions as a tool, how it protects you and directs you, and the moment when that same tool becomes a trap. Somewhere between the sacred use and the shadow form of each pattern lies the map to your next move. Let's walk it together. 1. Addiction to isolation and silence. You crave space. You find yourself saying no to invitations, retreating into long stretches of quiet, turning down the volume on social life as if the world's chatter scratches at a newly tender wound. You might call it needing time, but there's often a pull that feels deeper than simple preference, a gravitational tug towards stillness, a greenhouse atmosphere where fragile seeds take root. In that greenhouse, you shelter what is sprouting inside you. Spiritual purpose. Silence acts as incubation. When you were asleep to inner life, your habits and responses were shaped by noise, inherited narratives, other people's expectations, momentum. Silence gives the soul the air and heat it needs to reorganize. It's how you hear clearer signals, subtle impulses, recurring dreams, a thread of longing that points toward an authentic vocation. The craving for solitude is a purification process, not withdrawal from life, but preparation for a fuller presence in it. It's a rewiring that asks, what wants to be born in you if you stopped responding to every call? Signs you're in sacred incubation. You come back from solitude more centered. Decisions become less frantic and more intentional. You feel creatively fed even when you're alone. There's a sense of inner growth that matches stillness. Shadow warning. Isolation becomes avoidance when it cuts you off from necessary support, when the greenhouse turns into a bunker. If you notice yourself using silence to dodge conversation that needs honesty, or if you begin to score relationships by how little they demand of you, this sacred boundary has hardened into a wall. The test is not the amount of silence, but the result. Does isolation restore your capacity to engage, or does it shrink it? A practical question to hold. After long stretches alone, do I return refreshed and able to connect, or do I hide from people and responsibility? That answer points you toward whether the silence is sheltering or sheltering you away from what needs repair. And that leads directly into the next one, a hunger for truth. 2. Addiction to truth and intolerance for superficiality. You feel a visceral recoil at small talk that feels hollow, or at platitudes that paper over depth. You notice how quickly you detect dishonesty, not always lies, but evasions, half measures, the soft furniture of everyday politeness that hides real things. You seek clarity like a thirsty person seeks water. You can be unforgiving about illusions because you've learned the cost of living inside them. Spiritual purpose. A fierce devotion to truth cuts through consensus trance. It's a compass that prevents you from being steered by fear or fashion. In a world that often values agreement over authenticity, your intolerance for superficiality preserves the integrity of your path. It keeps you aligned with essential currents, refusing to be distracted by anything that dilutes your focus. Signs you're operating from sacred discernment. You can detect subtle incongruities. You choose transparency. You prefer fewer relationships that are honest than many that are performative. Your life simplifies around what matters. Shadow warning. Truth without tenderness becomes a blade. If you use clarity as a weapon, if intolerance mutates into contempt, you're injuring others and isolating yourself. Radical honesty that lacks compassion severs bridges the soul later needs to cross. The sacred truth is leavened with humility, the knowledge that your lens is not the only lens. Mini-gauge. When you call someone out, is the purpose to free them or to be right? If the aim is correction with love, you're in the sacred zone. If it's correction to assert superiority, you've stepped into the shadow. This craving for truth and clarity naturally feeds the next pattern, persistence. 3. Addiction to persistence, the refusal to quit. There's a voice inside you that refuses to surrender. Even when the terrain is rough, even when resources run thin, you keep going. You're that person who won't let a project die, who shows up again and again because something in you knows the road matters. This is endurance with a spiritual spine, a refusal to let destiny be derailed by momentary storms. Spiritual purpose. Persistence is the muscle memory of the soul's calling. Many awakenings are not about a single epiphany, but a slow, stubborn tending of what matters. Persistence becomes the alchemy that turns small daily acts into a trajectory. It speaks to the idea that fate rarely arrives fully formed. It's built grain by grain. Signs you're in the sacred form of persistence. Disciplined attention that doesn't punish rest. An ability to pivot without abandoning the core intention. A rhythm that sustains you. You show up without needing applause. Your faith is in the long game. Shadow warning. Persistence without clarity turns into obstinacy. You can tie yourself to a path that no longer points toward the same light. Burnout becomes a religious experience, proof you care at the cost of your well-being. There's dignity in endurance, but only when persistence is paired with recalibration. If you keep pushing because stopping feels like failure rather than because the course still matters, compassion for your limits is the missing component. Short discernment. Does my persistence increase my capacity and align with my deepest aim? Or am I persevering out of fear of loss, identity, or the belief that quitting equals worthlessness? If the latter, it's time to ask whether persistence is protecting a story rather than a purpose. And that compassion you give to others sometimes becomes an emergency response pattern in itself. 4. Compulsive compassion, helping without reciprocity. You find yourself saying yes too often. You give time, energy, forgiveness, and sometimes your very presence, expecting nothing and often receiving little. People are drawn to you because your empathy has an open tap. You recognize need quickly and step in. What may look like martyrdom to some is for you a soulful instinct, to meet suffering with a hand extended. Spiritual purpose. The soul often recognizes kin in other people's pain. Your compassion can be a bridge, an energetic transmission that helps another person remember their own wholeness. In many traditions, the healed are healers. Your willingness to carry someone else's load functions as an instrument of repair and resonance. Sometimes the mere fact of being seen by you helps others remember themselves. Signs you're in the sacred expression of compassion. You help and return to replenish without resentment. You hold boundaries naturally while staying available. Your giving is life-giving to both parties. You can step away when it becomes harmful for your own vessel. Shadow warning. Compassion becomes compulsive when it's automatic, unenforced by limits, and leaves you depleted or used. If you feel resentful after giving, or you keep giving to avoid your own discomfort or to maintain a self-image as the one who helps, your generosity has become self-erasing. Without reciprocity or context, helping can become a way of avoiding your own healing work. I'll be honest, I've caught this pattern in myself. Feeling needed felt like worth, until it nearly emptied me. That's the moment I learned to offer a different kind of availability, one that includes boundaries as an act of love. Discernment tool. Before you say yes, ask, will this act of service honor both of us? Or is it a bandage on someone else's recurring wound that I'm enabling? If it drains you and prolongs dependency, it's time to reframe the help you offer. Compassion often leads the seeker back to memory, and sometimes that return is purposeful. 5. Revisiting the past for energetic recalibration. You find yourself returning to old scenes in memory, not purely out of nostalgia, but as a mechanic of healing. You revisit conversations, replay decisions, and probe early attachments as if searching for an energetic key. This is not idle rumination, it's detective work. Each replay holds clues to patterns, loyalties, and energetic contracts that once served you but now obstruct the path. Spiritual purpose. The past is a library of unfinished threads. The soul sometimes asks you to go back and read those pages with a new heart so you can release what's bound and reclaim what's yours. Revisiting can recalibrate wounds, resolve misalignments, and extract learning that stiff, time-worn patterns into new form. It's how you rewrite scripts. You identify the scenes where you accepted less than you deserved, and you choose differently now. Signs you're in sacred recalibration. Your revisits lead to insight and release. You integrate lessons and act differently. You feel lighter after processing a memory. You document, ritualize, or hold ceremony around closure points. Not to relive pain, but to rescript it. Shadow warning. Returning to the past becomes rumination when it loops without resolution or when it's used to justify current inaction. If you're stuck replaying hurt to the point that it fuels bitterness rather than growth, you're caught in a coil. The sacred revisit is finite and directed. The shadowed revisit keeps you tethered to the very story you need to outgrow. A practical boundary. Set an intention before you revisit. What am I looking to recover or release? When the visit starts looping without purpose, bring it to a close and redirect energy to an action that affirms the new story. Which brings us to a sibling pattern, obsession with meaning. 6. Addiction to meaning, constant analysis and scanning. You habitually look for patterns. Symbols, synchronicities, little signs in daily life become a language you read diligently. You decode dreams, headlines, songs, and conversations for deeper signals, always scanning for threads that weave into your personal map. This can be a beautiful attunement, a skillful mind learning to trust intuition. But it also comes with the risk of never settling. Spiritual purpose. Your gift is perception. Where others skim surfaces, you excavate layers. This constant meaning-making trains your soul to find signal inside noise. It's how you learn to recognize guidance and to orient yourself when external maps fail. The scanning mind is an antenna attuned to subtle realities, helping you navigate an inner continent few can perceive. Signs of sacred meaning-making. Your analysis leads to clarity and actionable insight. You can extract a kernel of truth and apply it. Your discoveries deepen your compassion and creativity. You feel enriched by patterns that cohere into wisdom. Shadow warning. When meaning-making becomes a stall tactic, when analysis keeps you from action, it's a paralysis disguised as profundity. Overinterpretation can inflate coincidences into destiny and keep you stuck in thinking rather than embodied doing. The sacred scanner moves you forward. The shadowed scanner keeps you circling. Quick test. After a period of meaning scanning, does your next step become clearer, or are you left spinning hypotheses with no movement? If movement stalls, practice reducing interpretation in favor of a tiny, courageous action. Finally, the gravity that underpins many of these patterns is internal pressure. 7. Self-pressure driven by soul memory. You hold yourself to a high internal standard, not merely because of social expectations, but because a deeper part of you remembers a calling, a larger timeline. There's a sense of having promised something to the future or to the soul itself, and so you push, prod, and prod again to live up to that memory. Rest can feel suspect. Leisure can seem like a betrayal of potential. Spiritual purpose. Self-pressure can be the engine that births contribution. If the soul remembers a larger garment, the pressure to grow into it can be constructive. It propels discipline, mastery, and the honoring of gifts. That inner strictness can be the very force that gets you to the other side of mediocrity, into influence, artistry, or service. Signs you're in a sacred zone of pressure. Your internal standards are paired with self-compassion. Failure becomes a teacher rather than a judge. You take breaks and return with renewed focus. Pressure fuels refinement rather than self-erasure. Shadow warning. When soul memory becomes a tyrant, rest is demonized and joy is postponed indefinitely. If you measure worth by output and never by presence, the pressure has become a dictator. Perfectionism then grinds the life out of living. Your highest calling should never be served by your own continued depletion. Discernment question. Does my inner pressure push me toward a life I love, or does it make life a ledger where I never balance the books? If the ledger wins, practicing permission to be human is the corrective. Synthesis. The sacred versus the shadow. Now that we've walked each pattern, let's look for the thread that binds them. What turns a protective habit into a harmful loop? The difference is often threshold. The sacred tends to expand capacity. The shadow contracts it. Here are 3 concrete signposts to tell them apart. 1. Time lost versus time invested. If the behavior leaves you with more life, more clarity, more relationship, more creative output, it's likely sacred. If it consumes hours that leave you empty or anxious without producing lift, watch carefully. Sacred use invests time in growth. Shadow use wastes time in avoidance. 2. Energy returned versus energy drained. After the behavior, does your energy cycle regenerate or are you empty? Sacred practices tend to return energy in one form or another, often subtle but present. Shadow patterns leave you depleted, resentful, or increasingly smaller. 3. Alignment versus avoidance. Sacred behaviors align you with deeper purpose. Shadow behaviors avoid necessary work. Ask, is this pattern helping me align with the life I feel called to live, or is it protecting me from a truth, a relationship, or a step I'm afraid to take? Add to these a few practical markers. Does the pattern invite recalibration? Is there recognition in your body when you've crossed the line? Do trusted people you love raise concerns that resonate? These cues are part of your map. The spiritual permission slip. Here's a truth that can change how you treat yourself. Higher forces sometimes issue what I like to call a spiritual permission slip. During transition seasons, the soul is allowed, even encouraged, to adopt certain compulsions to survive and reorient. That permission slip can look like prolonged solitude, relentless focus on a mission, or intense meaning scanning. It is temporary scaffolding put around a fragile renovation. But permission is conditional, not perpetual. It's there to carry you through a phase, not to become your identity. Think of it like wearing a cast after a fracture, necessary for healing, but not meant to be permanent. The wise move is to note the permission, use it intentionally, and set periodic reviews where you test whether the cast can come off. Put markers on your calendar to check in, ask trusted allies for honest feedback, and practice small experiments that test whether your tool still serves its original purpose. Practical signposts you can use today. When discernment is hard, try these simple questions as daily calibrators. After I practice this pattern, is my capacity for life increased? If yes, keep it. If no, adjust. Does this behavior move me toward my calling or away from intimacy and vitality? If a trusted friend could see this pattern, would they say it's nourishing or depleting? What would a compassionate version of this behavior look like, one with boundaries and rest included? A short exercise. Imagine you're advising a close friend who exhibits the same pattern. What would you say to them? Often you can offer your own soul more grace than you allow. Give yourself the same counsel you'd give a beloved. Reframing your perceived flaws as mechanisms. Understand this. What you call a flaw may be a survival mechanism that once did heroic work. The person who compulsively revisits the past did so to retrieve truth that would have gone unnoticed. The one who won't quit might be the anchor in a chaotic world. The relentless compassion could be the tender balm someone needed to find themselves. Reframing doesn't excuse harm, it invites curiosity. You can honor the intention while refining the method. When you reframe, ask two questions. What did this pattern protect me from, and what does it allow me to become? The first reveals its origin, the second points to its destiny. A brief, practical roadmap for moving from shadow to sacred. 1. Name it without judgment. Say it out loud. I am addicted to X. Naming dissolves shame. 2. Sit with the purpose. What did it protect? Offer gratitude to that part for keeping you safe. 3. Set boundaries around it. This can be time-based, I will spend no more than X hours in solitude, or role-based. I will not do free emotional labor for people who refuse to reciprocate. 4. Create small tests. Replace rumination with one brief action. Replace overanalysis with a single step. Replace compulsive giving with a clear offer with terms. 5. Recruit a witness. Ask a trusted friend or coach to hold you accountable. We often need a mirror to see what we cannot from within. Remember, discernment is the practice of learning the difference between when a pattern is serving and when it's enslaving. You do not have to relinquish what protected you, only to refine it into a tool that propels rather than imprisons. Closing encouragement. You are not wrong for where you are. These 7 fixations are evidence of a nervous system rearranging itself to a new scale of life. They tell a story. The soul is waking, making space, insisting on truth, refusing to quit, compassionately reaching, decoding memories, and holding itself to a future that remembers greatness. Each behavior is a signpost on the same road. The surprising purpose behind them is that they are not mistakes, but maps. Sometimes messy, sometimes imperfectly followed, but maps nonetheless. So treat yourself like the transiting traveler you are. Give yourself the spiritual permission slip when you need it, and the gentle wake-up when it's time to move on. Use the 3 signposts, time, energy, alignment, as your compass. Name the pattern, honor the purpose, and then ask the deeper question: how can I carry this gift forward without letting it carry me away? Which of these 7 have you experienced? Share in the comments. Your honesty helps others feel seen. If this was helpful, subscribe and share so we can continue this conversation together. Go gently. Be curious. Your patterns are not your prison. They are the scaffolding that, when tended with care, delivers you home.